They stole my keys, they changed the locks, they said, "It's our house now, old woman. Find somewhere else to rot." And for a moment, I let them believe it. It happened on a windy Thursday evening in Oak Ridge, a small town where people still left their porch lights glowing and gossip traveled faster than the mail. I had just returned from the grocery store, my hands stiff from the cold, paper bags heavy with cans and milk. The front door wouldn't budge. I twisted the knob until the skin on my palm burned, but the key slipped uselessly as if the lock had swallowed it whole. Then I heard the giggles behind the curtains. My granddaughter's high-pitched snicker. My grandson's muttered, "She'll figure it out soon." I knocked. "Open this door." The laughter grew. Finally, the door cracked open a few inches. Madison's face appeared, phone in hand, her expression smug. "Grandma, this isn't your place anymore. You should really start looking for a retirement home." She swung the door wider, and beside her stood Ryan, arms crossed, holding up a jingling key ring. My keys. The ones I'd kept for decades on a brass ring worn smooth by my thumb. He dangled them like a trophy. "We changed the locks this afternoon. It's safer this way. You might forget and leave the stove on again." My chest tightened, not from shame, but from the sheer audacity. This is my home. I paid for every brick. "Correction," Madison chirped, tapping her phone as if she were giving a presentation. "Grandpa did. You just lived here, and he's gone. Which means the house belongs to Dad, and now us." Simple math. They stepped aside, revealing suitcases stacked in the hall. Not mine, theirs. Ryan had already dragged his gaming chair into the living room, its neon edges glowing sickly against the wallpaper I'd chosen 40 years ago. Madison's makeup bag sprawled across the dining table, powders and lipsticks where my husband once placed the newspaper each morning. I took one step inside. Madison blocked me with her arm. "Not tonight. Maybe you can sleep in the garage, or the porch swing if you want fresh air." The cold draft stung my cheeks. I clutched the grocery bags tighter so they wouldn't see my hands shake. "Give me my keys." Ryan grinned. "No." Then he slammed the door in my face. For a long while, I stood there on the porch, staring at the wreath still hanging on the door from Christmas. Its berries were fake, its ribbon faded. I remembered the year I'd woven fresh pine and holly into it, back when my grandchildren were small and still believed in magic, back when they would run into my arms shouting, "Grandma," instead of locking me out of my own life. The wind cut sharp across the yard. I set the grocery bags down on the step, one can rolling loose and clattering against the wood. Inside, muffled music began to pound, their victory dance. Neighbors passed by on the sidewalk. Mr. Jenkins slowed, tilted his head, then kept walking, eyes down. No one wanted to get involved. To them, I was just another old woman shuffled out of her house by younger, louder voices. I should have felt broken, defeated. But as I pulled my coat tighter and turned toward the street, I felt something else, a kind of cold that wasn't from the wind, a clarity that stiffened my spine, because they thought the deed was theirs. They thought the locks mattered. They thought I was powerless. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago, before my husband passed, I had signed every last paper with the realtor. The house was no longer ours, not his, not mine, not theirs. It belonged to someone else entirely, and that someone had the law on their side. I had kept the sale quiet, stashing the paperwork in a folder beneath the linens, not out of malice, but foresight. My husband had whispered on his last night, "They'll try to take everything. Don't let them." And I hadn't. Now, standing on the porch, I almost smiled. They were celebrating inside, convinced they'd won. They had no idea the ground beneath their feet was already gone. I walked slowly down the driveway, the roses I had planted years ago scratching against my coat as if waving me onward. The street lamps flickered, and the town felt different that night. Not small, not suffocating, but wide open, like a stage waiting for the curtain to rise. I headed toward the corner, where the bailiff's car would arrive by morning with papers in hand. By this time tomorrow, those same grandchildren would be the ones standing on the sidewalk, clutching their bags, shivering in the night air. And I, the ghost they thought they'd erased, would be watching. I whispered into the wind, "Enjoy your last night," because revenge had already been written, notarized, and sealed, and the locks they changed tonight. They would be unlocking their own downfall. The knock came early, at 8:07 a.m., not a friendly knock, not the kind neighbors use when they stop by with banana bread. This one was sharp, official, steady, a sound that slices the morning in half. I was already outside, across the street, pretending to adjust my scarf against the March wind. My thermos steamed in my hands. I sipped slowly, as though I had all the time in the world, because I did. The bailiff's sedan sat in my driveway, paint dull but dependable, a car that smelled of leather files and authority. I didn't need to go closer. I wanted to see it from here, the way you'd watch the first domino fall. Inside the house, chaos stirred. Curtains twitched. My grandson Ryan stumbled into view, his hair sticking up like straw, his face pale and slack from sleep. He opened the door halfway, muttered something I couldn't hear. The bailiff answered loudly, each word clipped, deliberate. "Eviction order. This property is no longer yours. Papers filed, deed transferred. You have until sundown to vacate." I almost pitied the boy. Almost. His mouth opened and closed like a fish dragged out of water. He snatched the papers from the bailiff's hand, scanning lines he couldn't begin to understand. There's no way," he stammered. "This is our house." My dad said, "Your dad doesn't own this property," the bailiff interrupted. He'd done this before. He knew the script. "It was sold last year. Everything is legal and recorded. You're trespassers. That's the law." My granddaughter Madison appeared behind him in pajama shorts, eyeliner smudged like bruises. She shoved past her brother and tried on that sugary smile she always used to get out of parking tickets. "Wait, there's a mistake. We live here. Look, see. Our stuff's everywhere. It's our home." "Not anymore." The bailiff checked his watch, unimpressed. "You have until sundown to clear out. After that, I'll return with deputies." The door slammed shut. For a moment, the street was silent except for the rattle of branches in the wind. Then it came. Shouting. Ryan's voice, cracked and angry. Madison screeching, "She did this! That old witch did this!" I smiled into my scarf. Witch. Burden. Ghost. I'd worn every insult they could invent, but none of them could erase a signed deed. By late morning, the bailiff was back, this time with the new owners, a calm couple in their 50s, polite but firm. They toured the property briskly, taking notes on gutters, shingles, cracked paint. Madison trailed after them, babbling. "You don't understand. This house has been in our family for generations. Grandpa built—" The woman cut her off. "Ma'am, it's ours now. Your grandmother sold it. We've got the papers. You should start packing." The man added dryly, "If you need boxes, the moving company usually leaves some behind." I watched from across the street as Madison's face crumbled. She tried charm, then outrage, then tears. But none of it mattered. Paperwork doesn't weep. By noon, Ryan was pacing the porch, phone pressed to his ear. "Dad, you need to fix this. Call someone. She tricked us." I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew exactly how the conversation went. Him demanding, his father fumbling, everyone scrambling while the clock ticked louder. At 2:00, I walked by on purpose. Madison spotted me first, her eyes lit with venom. She stormed down the steps, fists balled tight. You did this." I stopped on the sidewalk, kept my thermos steady. "Did what?" "You sold the house behind our backs." "Behind your backs." I tilted my head. "No, dear, right in front of you. You just never cared enough to look." Her lips trembled, words caught between rage and panic. "We're family." "Family doesn't change the locks on their grandmother." My voice was flat, cold. "Family doesn't laugh while you're shivering on the porch with your groceries in your hands." Ryan came charging out, voice rising. "Where are we supposed to go, huh? You want us on the street?" I looked straight at him, steady as stone. "The street didn't mind watching me last night." His jaw clenched. Madison looked away. For the first time, I saw fear mix with their fury. The bailiff called from the driveway, calm as a metronome. 3 hours left. By late afternoon, their things began piling on the curb. Designer suitcases, trash bags stuffed with clothes, tangled cords from Ryan's gaming setup, Madison's vanity mirror already cracked along one edge. One by one, their trophies of comfort were dragged into the open. Neighbors emerged, pretending to sweep porches or collect mail. Their eyes never left the scene. The same children who once bragged about Grandpa's empire, now reduced to beggars on a sidewalk. Madison wailed, voice high, brittle. "She ruined us. She ruined everything." I stepped closer, my shoes clicking against the pavement. "No, child. You ruined yourself when you forgot who built the roof you lived under." At 5, the bailiff locked the door and handed the keys to the new owners. His voice was final. "You're done here." The sun was sinking, painting the siding orange as though the house itself was blushing at their disgrace. Ryan sat on a duffel bag, hands tangled in his hair. Madison hugged her purse to her chest like it could shield her. Both stared at me with the kind of hatred only born from power lost. I raised my thermos in a mock toast. "Welcome to the outside." They glared, teeth clenched, bodies trembling in the wind, and for the first time, they understood what I'd known all along. Comfort is borrowed, but deeds are permanent. I turned, walked slowly down the street, letting my shadow stretch long across the pavement. Their screams followed, shrill and useless, because this wasn't the end, not even close. The house was only one piece. Tomorrow, they'd learn about the trust, the land, the money they'd been counting on for years. I whispered into the wind, "You thought you changed the locks." I changed the story. And their story was only beginning to collapse. Hunger shows in the eyes first. I saw it in theirs the very next morning, red-rimmed, hollow, frantic, the kind of look people get when the ground they thought was solid suddenly swallows them whole. Ryan had dark circles under his eyes, his jaw tight as a locked box. Madison's eyeliner ran in crooked streaks, her hair tied up like she'd yanked it back with shaking hands. They weren't predators anymore. They were scavengers clutching gas station coffee cups, dragging suitcases with broken wheels. They stood outside the Oak Ridge First Bank like customers about to make a deposit. But I knew what was coming. I sat on a bench across the street, scarf pulled tight, thermos steaming in my hands. Same scarf as yesterday, same calm. The world rushed past, cars honking, a delivery truck unloading crates, a mother tugging her child's mittened hand. But for me, time slowed. I was watching the second act begin. The glass doors whooshed open. Ryan strode in first, chin high, shoulders squared, as if sheer posture could bend numbers in his favor. Madison followed, heels clicking sharp against the tiles, her voice already raised before they even reached the counter. Through the wide glass wall, I saw the show unfold. Ryan slapped his ID on the counter, spoke fast. Madison leaned forward, gesturing wildly, her mouth moving too quick for courtesy. The teller nodded, tapped at the keyboard, frowned. She disappeared into a back office. When she returned with a manager, I could read the ending on his face before he opened his mouth. Calm, detached. The practiced tone of someone who delivers bad news for a living. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. No access. Not your account. Not your funds. Ryan's fist hit the counter hard enough that even from outside I felt the vibration. Madison started shaking her head so violently her ponytail snapped back and forth like a whip. The manager slid papers across the counter, copies, legal seals, printed proof, and pointed to the signatures. My husband's, mine. Not theirs, never theirs. That was the moment the denial cracked. I saw it in Ryan's shoulders slumping, in Madison's sudden collapse onto the bench by the ATM. A single page had stolen the empire they thought belonged to them. They stumbled out minutes later. Ryan crumpled the papers and hurled them into the gutter. Madison's mascara bled down her face as she shrieked, "This can't be real. She can't just erase us." Ryan kicked over a trash can, soda cups, and candy wrappers scattering across the sidewalk. "She set us up. That witch planned this all along." I didn't move from my bench. A pigeon hopped closer, pecking at a French fry, unconcerned with human disaster. Ordinary morning for everyone else. For them, it was the end of their world. Madison's phone buzzed. She put it on speaker without thinking, her voice jagged as glass. "Dad, tell me this is a mistake. They said the trust isn't even in your name anymore. What does that mean?" A pause. Then their father's voice, thin, weary, already defeated. "It means she moved it, all of it, years ago. I didn't know." "You didn't know," Madison wailed. "We're standing on the street with nothing. Do you get it? Nothing?" Ryan snatched the phone. "You let her do this. We should have taken control sooner. Now she's got everything, and we've got nothing." I let their voices echo across the street like theater dialogue, drinking them in like music. They thought they'd stolen my house. They forgot I had already sold it. They thought my silence meant surrender. They never imagined silence could be strategy. By afternoon, I found them again, this time outside the lawyer's office. The receptionist stood in the doorway, lips pursed, holding an envelope. She didn't invite them in. She simply extended the paper and shut the glass door. Ryan ripped it open right there on the sidewalk. A single line cut across the top. Notice of removal from beneficiary status. Both their names were crossed out in bold ink. Final. He read it twice, his lips moving silently. Then he crumpled the page and threw it against the door. Madison's scream tore through Main Street, shrill and hopeless. Passers-by stopped, stared, whispered. That's when I decided to step forward. My boots clicked against the pavement. They turned, faces twisted, eyes burning. "You!" Madison spat. "You destroyed us." I looked at her calmly, as though she were a stranger asking for directions. "I didn't destroy you. I gave you everything once. Food, shelter, a roof, a chance. You mistook patience for weakness. That was your mistake." Ryan took one step toward me, fists clenched. "Where are we supposed to go now?" "Anywhere but here," I said evenly. The street was silent for a beat, except for the low rumble of an engine. The bailiff's car rolled slowly past, windows down. He gave me the smallest nod. The message was clear. Law was on my side. Ryan froze where he stood. Madison's shoulders shook with rage, but she didn't move either. They couldn't. The game had flipped, and they had no pieces left on the board. The sun was dropping low, staining the courthouse roof gold. I turned and walked away, my shadow stretching long, theirs stunted behind me. "You'll pay for this." Madison's voice cracked behind me. "You can't just erase us." But she was wrong. Erasure had already happened. They just hadn't noticed until the ink was dry, because this wasn't only about the house, or the trust, or even the inheritance. This was about legacy. And tomorrow they'd discover the final strike. Not only had I cut them from the past, I had barred them from the future. And the look on their faces then, that would be worth every silent year I endured. Revenge doesn't end with eviction papers. No, that was just the first shiver down their spines. True revenge is colder. It seeps in, slow, through cracks they never noticed, until one morning they wake up and realize everything they trusted is already gone. After the bailiff locked the door, Oak Ridge buzzed. People talked on porches, in line at the post office, over coffee at the diner. Everyone had seen them, Ryan and Madison, dragging suitcases into the night like actors shoved off stage mid-performance. Everyone knew they had been thrown out not by a landlord, but by their own grandmother. And everyone knew they had no place to go. For 2 days, they drifted. I watched them without needing to follow. Oak Ridge is small. Secrets don't last here. A friend at the motel told me they checked in with cash, only to be turned out at checkout when they couldn't pay for another night. Someone else spotted them sleeping in the back of a cousin's pickup, condensation fogging the windows while the engine stayed cold. The library clerk told me they came in to charge their phones, whispering furiously at each other over the free Wi-Fi. By the third morning, I knew desperation would push them somewhere uglier. And it did. Mrs. Lopez, who sells pies at the Saturday market, saw Madison meet a man in a gray suit behind the coffee shop. She handed him a folder so thick the elastic nearly snapped. Her voice carried, "She's losing it. We just need a judge to see it. Then it all comes to us." That word, guardianship, spread through town like a storm warning. Ryan, too, wasn't subtle. Mr. Jenkins told me he overheard him on the phone behind the gas station. She won't even know what hit her. Once the court declares her incompetent, we control everything. Money, land, the rest of the trust. She'll be locked up in a nursing home before she can blink. So that was the plan. If they couldn't wait for my death, they'd try to steal my life. For a moment, I let the chill sink into me. Not fear, not shock, just clarity. They were cornered animals snapping at anything they thought weaker. They had forgotten that silence was never weakness. It was observation. I didn't panic. I prepared. The courthouse smelled of paper and dust, the kind that clings to your throat. I heard them before I saw them. Voices too loud for the marble hallways, too confident for the echo of their shoes. Madison carried the folder like a weapon, Ryan marching beside her, his chin high, his hands trembling just enough to betray the truth. They stepped to the clerk's counter. "We're here to file for emergency guardianship," Madison announced, sliding the folder forward. Her tone was sugar poured over arsenic. "Our grandmother is no longer capable of managing her affairs." The clerk, a tired woman with a pinched face and glasses slipping down her nose, flipped through the pages. "Do you have medical documentation?" Madison's smile wavered. "It's coming." "But the situation is urgent. She's mismanaging assets. We need control now before more is lost." The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You'll need more than accusations." That was when I stepped forward, cane tapping against the floor. Their faces drained at the sight of me. Madison's lips parted. Ryan muttered, "She's not supposed to be here." "Oh, but I am," I said evenly. "And unlike you, I came with proof." I handed the clerk my own folder. It was thicker, heavier, leather-bound. Inside, notarized medical evaluations from 2 independent doctors confirming my competence, each page signed and sealed. A letter from my attorney detailing the legal sale of the house, the restructuring of the trust, the transfer of assets, and at the very top, stapled neatly, a copy of their eviction notice stamped by the county itself. The clerk scanned the documents, then looked at Ryan and Madison with something close to pity. "Without valid medical evidence, your petition won't stand. Especially against this." Madison's cheeks burned crimson. She snatched her folder back, hissing through clenched teeth. "This isn't over." "No," I said softly. "It's only beginning." We left the courthouse together, though not side by side. They paused on the steps, whispering furiously, their voices sharp knives clashing. I kept walking until I reached the bottom, then turned back. "You changed the locks on me," I said, loud enough for them to hear. "Now the law has locked you out. Think carefully before your next move, because I'm always 5 steps ahead." The words hung in the air. Neither of them replied. They couldn't. That evening, Oakridge whispered again. This time it was betrayal that carried on the wind. At the gas station, Ryan had been overheard shouting into his phone. "If Dad won't help us, we'll do it ourselves. We'll sell what's left. The land, the cabin. She can't keep track of everything. The cabin, my husband's refuge tucked away on 10 acres of pine. They thought it was still theirs to claim. They thought they'd found a loose thread in my web. But the truth, that thread had already been cut months ago, signed over, filed, protected. They would arrive to stake their claim only to find strangers waiting, strangers with fresh papers and zero mercy. I closed my curtains that night, listening to the wind rattle the window panes. Somewhere in the dark, I imagined their whispers, their frantic schemes, their fear turning into venom. They thought guardianship would cage me. They thought a forgotten cabin would save them. But tomorrow, they'd discover the truth. Not only were they locked out of my house, my trust, my inheritance, they had no ground left to stand on. There's a saying my husband used to repeat whenever the children tested him: greed eats its own. At the time, I thought it was just a father's scolding. But now, watching Ryan and Madison unravel, I understood it was prophecy. The very next morning, they drove out to the cabin, our last scrap of family land, the place Harold built with his own hands in the 70s, where summers smelled of pine and kerosene lanterns. They thought they were clever, slipping out before dawn with borrowed gas money, a rusting pickup, coughing smoke all the way down Route 11. They thought no one would notice, but Oak Ridge notices everything. By the time they reached the gravel drive, the news had already reached me. Your grandchildren are trying to sell your cabin. Mrs. Lopez again, sharp-eyed, on her way to her sister's farm. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. Because when they arrived at that cabin, expecting empty windows and dust, they found a black sedan parked squarely out front, and two strangers standing with clipboards. The new owners, papers in hand, smiles polite, unmovable. "This is our land," Ryan barked, chest puffed. "Our grandmother left it to us." The man raised one brow. Actually, it was sold 6 months ago, transferred legally, recorded in the county office. "This is our land now. You're trespassing." Madison shoved forward, voice shrill. "She can't sell it without us." The woman held out the deed, stamped, notarized, final. She did. She could. She did. Neighbors from the next property wandered closer, drawn by the shouting. By the time the sheriff arrived, because yes, the new owners had already called, Ryan's voice was raw from screaming. Madison's mascara streaked again, black rivers across her cheeks. The sheriff listened, arms folded. Then he said simply, "You've got no claim here. Best leave before I have to make it official." And so, humiliated, they dragged themselves back into the pickup. The engine sputtered, the gravel crunched. They left nothing behind but boot prints and spit. I was waiting when they returned to town, not on purpose. I just happened to be at the diner counter sipping black coffee. When they stumbled in, angry, hollow, filthy from the road, the whole place went silent. Forks paused mid-air. Chairs creaked. Oak Ridge had already heard. "They've got nothing left," someone whispered. Ryan slammed his fist on the counter, demanding eggs he couldn't pay for. Madison tried to charm the waitress, tears trembling in her eyes. But pity was in short supply now. Everyone in that diner had seen how they treated me. Everyone knew the story. I took one last sip of coffee, folded a 5 on the counter, and rose. As I passed them, Madison hissed, "You won't get away with this." I leaned down just enough for only them to hear. "You think this is about getting away? Number. This is about teaching you what it feels like to lose what you never valued." Their faces, white with fury, red with shame, burned hotter than the neon sign buzzing above the door. But here's the thing about greed. It doesn't unite. It devours. That night, Oak Ridge buzzed again. Ryan and Madison had turned on each other. In the alley behind the motel, they screamed loud enough for neighbors to record on their phones. Madison accused Ryan of blowing their last savings on cigarettes and beer. Ryan accused Madison of paying a fake lawyer with borrowed cash. Voices cracked. Hands flew. The fight spread online before midnight. By morning, the town's Facebook page was lit with comments. Disgraceful. Ungrateful brats. Their poor grandmother. I didn't have to say a word. Their downfall was now public property. By noon, their father called me. His voice was brittle, hesitant. "Mom, Maybe we should talk. The kids, they're in a bad place. They put themselves there, I said coldly. But they're family. Family. I let the word hang heavy. Family doesn't lock you out of your own house. Family doesn't try to steal your life. Don't speak to me of family. He went quiet. Then he whispered something I never expected. I think they're coming for you. Desperate people. They might do desperate things. And there it was, the threat, the turning point. The moment I knew this wouldn't end with papers and shame. They'd been stripped of house, money, land. All they had left was rage, and rage always finds a weapon. That night, I locked my doors, not out of fear, but anticipation. Because if they wanted war, they were walking straight into the battlefield I'd already prepared. Night changes a house. The same walls that hold warmth by day seem to lean in after sundown, listening. That evening I felt it, the house alert, waiting, as if it knew the storm wasn't over. I had triple-checked every lock, slid the chain across the door, even propped a chair under the back handle. Not because I was afraid, because I knew Ryan and Madison were too angry to stay away. They'd lost the house, the trust, the cabin. What remained was pride, and pride is a dangerous currency. At 12:43 a.m., the sound came. A shuffle of feet on gravel, a hissed curse, a muffled laugh, too brittle to be joy. My heart didn't race. It slowed, steady as a drumbeat. Through the thin curtains I saw them, two figures, hoodies pulled low, the glow of Ryan's cheap lighter flickering across their faces. Madison carried a backpack, heavy, the zipper gaping. Something metallic clinked inside. They thought they were hunters in the dark. They didn't realize they were walking into a trap. I lifted the phone from the counter, dialed without speaking. The sheriff had given me his private line 2 days earlier. If they come back, call me first. No speeches, no warnings. I whispered one word, now. Then I hung up. Outside, Ryan tugged at the back door, cursing when the chair inside held it fast. Madison hissed, "Just break it." She can't stop us. They weren't here for talk. They were here for destruction. Maybe worse. I stepped into the hall, picked up the flashlight I'd set out hours earlier, and snapped it on. The beam cut through the kitchen window, blinding them for a second. They froze, caught like raccoons in the glare. I didn't shout. I didn't call their names. I simply stood there, light steady, face calm, letting them see me, letting them realize I wasn't hiding. Ryan snarled, slamming his shoulder into the door. The wood groaned but held. Madison screamed, high and ragged. She smashed something against the glass, metal against pane, a sharp crack. The window spiderwebbed but didn't break through. Then came the sirens. The sheriff's cruiser turned the corner, lights slicing red and blue across the lawn. Another car followed. Tires squealed, radios crackled. The quiet night exploded. Ryan dropped the crowbar he'd been hiding. It clanged on the porch. Madison's backpack sagged open. Spray paint cans, gloves, rope, evidence of more than trespass. "Hands up," the deputies barked. For 1 second, they hesitated, eyes wild like cornered animals. Then they obeyed. The sound of cuffs snapping shut was louder than any scream. I stepped onto the porch as they were shoved against the patrol car. My robe fluttered in the night wind, hair loose around my face. Ryan glared at me, veins standing in his neck. "You called them. You set us up." I tilted my head, voice even. "No, child, you set yourself up. I just gave you the stage." Madison sobbed, mascara streaking. "You're destroying your own blood." I leaned closer, just enough for her to hear. Blood means nothing if it poisons everything it touches. The sheriff caught my eye. "You pressing charges?" I didn't answer right away. The whole neighborhood had gathered by then, robes and slippers, whispering. They all saw. They all knew. Oak Ridge was small and shame travels fast. I folded my arms. Yes, trespassing, attempted vandalism, and whatever else you find in that bag. The deputies nodded, hauling them into the cruiser. Doors slammed. The sirens started again, fading down the road. The crowd lingered, stunned into silence. I stood on the porch, calm as stone, and finally said, "Go back to bed. Show's over." One by one, they drifted away. But I knew whispers would carry through every kitchen window by sunrise. The story had grown teeth now. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, the old wood scarred with decades of meals and homework. I poured myself a glass of water, hands steady. No shaking, no tears, just the weight of finality pressing gently on my shoulders. But I also knew this wasn't finished. Arrests humiliate, charges wound, but courtrooms bury, and I was ready. Because when the trial came, I had more than stories. I had receipts. I had witnesses. I had an entire town that had seen me locked out, stripped, mocked, and then watched my grandchildren return like thieves in the night. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was evidence. And in the end, evidence doesn't beg for forgiveness. It convicts. Courtrooms are built for echoes. Every word, every cough, every whisper bounces off the wood and stone until it feels heavier than it should. That morning, when I stepped through the tall double doors of the Oak Ridge Courthouse, I felt the weight press down on my shoulders. Not crushing, just steady, reminding me this was the place where lies came to die. Ryan and Madison were already seated at the defense table. Their lawyer sat between them, a sweating man with tired eyes who looked like he'd already lost. Ryan wore a wrinkled dress shirt, sleeves rolled halfway up his arms. Madison had tried to paint herself back together, but the mascara only emphasized the shadows under her eyes. She looked more like a child caught sneaking liquor than a woman facing felony charges. The gallery was full. Oak Ridge had turned out like it was a parade. Housewives with folded arms, farmers in boots dusted with hay, teenagers who pretended they didn't care but leaned forward at every outburst. Even the pastor sat near the back, eyes sharp behind his glasses. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair pulled tight, her robe falling like armor. She read the charges in a flat voice. Trespassing, attempted break-in, possession of burglary tools. Her gaze cut to my grandchildren. "Do you understand the charges?" Ryan muttered, "Yes, Your Honor." Madison nodded quickly, eyes glistening. The prosecutor rose. She didn't waste time. "This is not a case of confusion. This is a case of intent." The defendants were caught at midnight, equipped with tools, attempting to break into the home of their grandmother, a woman they had already evicted from her own house. Gasps rippled through the gallery. My grandchildren shifted uncomfortably under the sound. The prosecutor laid out evidence like stones. Photographs of the shattered window pane, the crowbar dropped on the porch, the backpack filled with spray paint, gloves, and rope. She called it a kit for crime, not reconciliation. Her words echoed. No one disagreed. Then came the witnesses. The sheriff testified first, describing the night with crisp detail. Mr. Clark threw his shoulder into the back door. Miss Clark struck the kitchen window with a metal object. Both ignored warnings. They were subdued only when backup arrived. Next was Mrs. Lopez, who told the court how she'd seen Madison passing folders to a man in a gray suit, whispering about guardianship. Her voice rang with certainty, the kind born from years of selling pies to half the town. "I know what I heard," she said firmly. Mr. Jenkins followed, his cane tapping the floor. "I overheard Ryan on the phone." His words were clear. "She won't even know what hit her. Judge'll hand us everything." He glanced at me then, and his eyes softened. I didn't think I'd live to see children scheme against their own grandmother. By the time he stepped down, the gallery was buzzing. The prosecutor let it swell before she called her final witness, me. I walked to the stand slowly, cane steady, eyes straight ahead. The oath felt heavy in my mouth, but when I sat, I felt lighter. "Mrs. Clark," the prosecutor said gently, "in your own words, what happened?" I looked at my grandchildren first. Their eyes darted away. Then I looked at the judge. They changed the locks on me. They laughed while I stood outside with groceries in my arms. They told me to sleep on the porch swing. That was the first betrayal. The room held its breath. When they realized I'd protected myself, sold the house, moved the trust, they tried something worse. Guardianship, declaring me incompetent. That's not a mistake. That's theft in disguise. And when that failed, they came in the night with crowbars and spray paint, not to talk, not to reconcile, to destroy. The silence after my words felt like stone settling. Even the judge didn't interrupt. Finally, she leaned forward. "Mrs. Clark, what do you want from this court?" I held her gaze. Not revenge, recognition. The recognition that cruelty from blood is still cruelty, that their choices were deliberate, not confused, and that choices have consequences. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, ma'am." I stepped down slowly, each tap of my cane a drumbeat. Madison wept openly now, tears streaking black down her face. Ryan sat rigid, fists clenched so tight his knuckles blanched. Their lawyer mumbled about youth, desperation, poor judgment, but the words fell flat. The judge's expression didn't change. Court recessed for the day. The verdict would come tomorrow. Outside, the air felt sharper, fresher, as though the town itself had been holding its breath. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, not for the grandchildren, but for me. One young man shoved a microphone toward my face. "Ma'am, why pursue charges against your own family? Why not forgive?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because forgiveness without accountability is surrender, and I am done surrendering." The crowd parted as I walked through. Behind me, I heard Madison's sobs, Ryan's muttered curses, the low growl of their father's voice trying to contain the damage. But Oak Ridge had already judged them. Tomorrow, the court would only make it official. That night, I sat by the window, candle flickering beside Harold's photo. The courthouse dome glowed faintly across town, a beacon. My phone buzzed with messages. Neighbors, strangers, women I hadn't spoken to in years. "You gave us courage." I thought I was the only one. Now I know I'm not alone. But I didn't bask in praise. I thought about Ryan and Madison in whatever cold room they'd been placed in, pacing like caged animals. I thought about their father, torn between shame and denial. And I thought about tomorrow, the moment when consequences would finally be nailed into place. I whispered to Harold's picture. They think they've hit bottom. They don't know bottom yet. Because the verdict wasn't the end. The verdict was the final hammer, and I had waited my whole life to hear it fall. The last morning came gray and wet, rain misting the courthouse steps until they gleamed like stone polished for a funeral. Oak Ridge gathered again, as they always did when blood spilled publicly. Men with damp hats, women whispering behind umbrellas, teenagers pretending they didn't care while angling their phones for photos. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like a hive. Ryan and Madison were brought in through the side door, cuffs removed but wrists still red. They looked smaller now, deflated, like balloons that had lost their air. Madison had tried to make herself presentable, hair brushed, blouse tucked, but her face betrayed her, pale, hollow, eyes swollen from nights of tears. Ryan sat stiff, chin high, but the twitch in his jaw gave him away. Their father sat at the back, alone, collar askew, gaze fixed on the floor. The judge entered, robe sweeping, her gavel cracking against wood. "This court will now hear the verdict." The clerk unfolded the paper. His voice rang through the chamber, sharp as a bell. On the charges of trespassing, attempted break-in, and possession of burglary tools, we the jury find the defendants guilty on all counts. The gallery erupted, gasps, murmurs, the scrape of boots on tile. Someone muttered, "About time." Others nodded solemnly as though justice had been a long guest finally arriving. Madison broke instantly, sobbing into her hands. "Please, Grandma, don't let them do this to us." Ryan slammed his palm against the table, earning a sharp glare from the bailiff. His voice cracked as he spat, "You've ruined us." The judge raised a hand, silence rippling back into place. Sentencing is as follows: 6 months in county jail for each defendant, followed by 2 years probation. Restitution will be paid to Mrs. Clark for damages. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell, final as a coffin lid. The deputies moved in, pulling my grandchildren to their feet. Madison fought the cuffs, mascara smearing like black scars across her cheeks. Ryan stared at me, eyes bloodshot, fury drowning in shame. Their father finally lifted his head, lips moving soundlessly. He didn't defend them. He didn't defend me. He just sat there, a hollow man in a courtroom full of echoes. I rose slowly, cane steady, my voice clear enough to slice the air. "No, I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourselves the night you threw me out of my own home." Every head in the gallery turned. The words landed like stones dropped in water, ripples spreading, touching everyone present. There was nothing left for Ryan or Madison to say. The deputies dragged them away. The side door slammed shut. And just like that, the world they thought belonged to them was gone. Outside, the crowd surged. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones thrust forward. "Ma'am, why take your own family to court? What message do you want to send?" I stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, the drizzle slicking my hair to my cheeks. My answer was simple. That blood without loyalty is just biology, and cruelty has a price. The umbrellas tilted, the pens scribbled, the cameras flashed, but I was already walking down the steps, one hand on my cane, the other free at my side. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing me down. That evening, I returned to my kitchen. I set Harold's photo on the table and lit the lavender candle I'd been saving. The flame flickered, soft and steady, casting his smile into sharper relief. Rain pattered on the roof, applause from the heavens. "They thought they erased me," I whispered, "but I erased them first." The candle burned low, the wax pooling slow as time. My house was quiet, my name restored, my dignity intact. Their names, however, were now shackled to mug shots and court records. They would never escape the stain. I blew out the flame. Smoke curled upward, thin and certain. They had slammed a door in my face once, locking me out in the cold. But in the end, I was the one who closed the door. For good. They thought they'd locked me out. In truth, I was the one holding the keys.